Alright guys, so in this video I'm going to be discussing if the passengers on the planes that were hijacked felt any pain. That's a question I see that gets circulated a lot, and we're going to kind of just dive deep into the four planes and kind of the thought process on what the passengers would be hearing in terms of them actually knowing if the planes were hijacked, if they didn't know at all, and just really try and understand what they were feeling. Now, I am going to show a few visuals here first. You can see the impact speed, and this is very important when it comes to pain. The impact speed, World Trade Center 1 at 443 miles per hour, and then at World Trade Center number 2, the South Tower, 546 miles per hour. There have been reports, maybe it's 590, maybe it's 570. It was really fast, and all four of these plane crashes involved planes with a velocity above 400 miles per hour, which means, and I'll answer it right here, there is zero chance that any passenger or any person on these four airliners felt any ounce or iota of pain. It is not possible. It doesn't register that fast. There is also the morbid idea of, what if the person's in the literal last seat, would they be able to comprehend that the plane is crashing, because the front of the plane, the tip, would be crashing into the, North Tower or South Tower, while theoretically the back of the plane, the wings, the back area, the cabin is still 100% intact. The thing about airplane crashes and velocity, when a plane's traveling at 500, 400 miles per hour, whatever it is, the second that plane, the tip of that plane, makes contact with the North Tower or the South Tower, everybody in that plane is instantly dead because of the speed immediately stopping. The human body cannot handle that. So they all died immediately. There is no chance anyone felt any pain. And you can just see some different visuals, and this gives you a good representation. You can see the tip of the plane with the time 0.00 seconds. The plane is already halfway through the building, and you're not even one, or I guess it would be 1/10 of 1 second. The plane is halfway through the building, and at that point, everybody in that plane is dead. Even the people in the back cabin, you can see the back cabin, visually it looks completely together because of the plane instantly stopping while it bangs into something. They would not be, it's just an instant death. That's the reality. And then that is 0.2 of a second into it, the entire plane is basically disintegrated. And that's one of the other things that people get very confused. And originally I was confused when it comes to studying different plane crashes. It's very, like, looking at the crash scene, the first thing everyone always asks, where's the plane? Well, if the plane is traveling 400, 500 miles per hour, it will literally disintegrate, or at least a lot of it will disintegrate into millions of very, very tiny pieces because of the speed at which it was going. That's not to say there weren't parts that ejected from both the North and South Tower onto the street. They recovered parts years after they recovered parts. There's different photos before both of the towers collapsed of parts on the plaza, in and around the area. There's actually, I saw a photo of a plane tire on the ground before the towers collapsed, and then this is just another visual. You can see engines and wings impacting the exterior wall. That's coming basically at 1/10 of 1 second, and then the entire aircraft is inside the tower. This is World Trade Center 2, so the South Tower, which was impacted a little bit quicker because it was going faster. You can see 0.2 of a second, the entire thing is into it, and there is the hole that was made. It's easy to determine that this was the South Tower based on the angle at which it entered. It was more angled than the North Tower, and also more over to the right, kind of off-center in terms of that. But we're also going to talk about each of the planes and what were the passengers feeling. Did they have any information? It is a crazy thing to think about. All of these people that, were tragically involved in 9/11, they don't even know the event 9/11 exists because they were dead before it was even, made this huge thing. It happened, and it's crazy and mind-boggling to think about. But I am going to go, talk about each of these plane paths starting, we're going to go in order. And this entire flight, it's just crazy. They were in the air for less than an hour. So this happened very quickly. And when it comes to the passengers, would they know anything? I'm guessing they would have assumed that this was some type of hijacking where the people that hijacked would want money from the US government. Nobody at that point was thinking that terrorists were going to use a plane as a weapon. It was just kind of like, obviously, they're going to try and land it somewhere. They don't want to die, so they just want money. And that was probably what they were thinking. But even that, it just happened all so quickly that it was probably hard to really register much of anything. But because this was the first plane, obviously, they're going to have no news from anyone. And then going into New York City, obviously, at this point, they're towards the back of the plane. They would have seen a lot of the skyscrapers flying extremely low, dangerously low. Obviously, that would be a horrible sign, especially how fast they were going. One of the scary things about airplanes, though, man, is you just don't realize how fast you're going. You really don't. And then when it comes to them, the Twin Towers, they wouldn't have even seen them based on their location. The only people that would have seen them would have been the terrorists in the cockpit, and the towers would have just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But that is the first plane and the flight path there. And then the second plane, you can see, this is another event that less than an hour, 8:14 they take off, 9:03. This ended up hitting the South Tower. You can see the turn, definitely different in terms of the flight path of the previous one. This one was done a lot more sloppy compared to the first one. That's why they kind of hit the right-hand side at an off angle of the tower. That did cause the tower to collapse faster. But you can just see that. So a very similar situation. These crashes took place within minutes of each other. So it's not like the passengers would have learned that, this was happening. It is crazy to think about. The passengers might have seen some of the smoke coming from the North Tower. Now, you're not going to put that into your brain and say, oh my God, the North Tower or one of the Twin Towers has been hit. This is a terrorist attack. They've hijacked it. They're going to hit the other Twin Tower. You just can't process all of that. But it is also crazy to think that the terrorists in the cockpit, they would have seen the smoke coming from the North Tower. And it's just like, oh my God, they actually hit it. Like, it's just, the whole situation is just so horrible. But I mean, you would have figured that them being in the cockpit, they would have seen the North Tower and the smoke clouds coming from it. And then the next flight path, you can see where they turned around right in the southernmost part of Ohio. And this was the plane that ended up hitting the Pentagon. And this one really isn't talked about very much, but it was similar to the first two where the passengers really didn't know what was going on. At this point, it hadn't been long, after the North and South Tower had been hit, so they were not really informed. And then this is the final one, the one that crashed in a field in Pennsylvania. Obviously, the passengers became aware. Number one, there was a 30-minute delay to this flight, and then the hijackers waited an additional 30 extra minutes, kind of having some hesitation. That's why the plane made it all the way out to Cleveland, Ohio before turning around. And also you had all the passengers calling down, understanding that there were already 3 planes, realizing what it was. And then, when it comes to it crashing, you can see it did veer off course a little bit. If you want to say that is evidence as to, the story of them trying to fight back control, of the plane from the terrorists, certainly it looks like that's what that is. Also, there are people that say, they had the government shoot it down. I mean, that's another discussion for another day. I will say where it went down, if you were going to shoot a plane down, that is the most ideal spot imaginable. It was completely remote, no civilian casualties, no one even close to it. So that would be a good place to take it down. I'm not saying that's what happened, but obviously they were the ones those passengers were at least informed of the situation, and that's why they were able to prevent it, although I do think those hijackers were a little bit more incompetent, even if they did stay up. I mean, there's just no way. There is no way on earth the United States government, after the first 3 have already hit, the 4th one is en route, confirmed 1,000% chance that it's hijacked. You're flying over unpopulated farmland in Pennsylvania. There's no way you don't take that plane down at some point. I'm not saying they took it down there, but I'm saying if it would have kept flying, The story is that they didn't have jets that could shoot the plane down, so the jets themselves would have to ram into the plane and crash it themselves and sacrifice themselves. That's the story. But either way, guys, the reality of this situation, it is impossible for anyone involved in these crashes based on the fact that they were all traveling over 400 miles per hour. It was impossible for the brain to register pain in the amount of time that's necessary for them to actually feel pain. So no, nobody felt pain. None of them even knew what was going on. I mean, outside of the fourth plane, obviously it was in some type of nosedive, and you pretty much know at that point, well, I guess it really depends. I'm guessing they would be very disoriented because it's really hard to see out the windows. You're getting flung all over the place and things like that, but obviously they would be the ones where they would kind of know, yeah, we're crashing, this is not happening, because they had all the other information from the other three planes crashing, and they realized their fate was pretty much sealed. Whether they took it down, the government took it down, or the terrorists crashed it into the U.S. Capitol or the White House, one of those things was going to happen, unfortunately, and it ended up being the plane going down in Pennsylvania. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.